Billionaire caught his maid's daughter eating leftovers. His unexpected reaction left everyone stunned. In a grand mansion perched high above the glittering city, billionaire Richard Hale lived surrounded by luxury yet burdened by loneliness. Since his wife's death, he had become known for his coldness and perfectionism. Everything in his home ran like clockwork. The marble floors reflected light like mirrors. The servants moved in silence, and every corner of his world was immaculate. Among the quiet workers was Clara, a middle-aged maid who had served him faithfully for years. Her life was the opposite of Richard's, simple, humble, and filled with struggle. She lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, raising her teenage daughter Lily after losing her husband in an accident. Lily was gentle and well-mannered, with eyes that carried both innocence and sadness. One stormy evening, Clara had no choice but to bring Lily with her to the mansion. The rain was relentless and she couldn't leave her daughter alone at home. Lily sat quietly in the kitchen corner, watching the staff prepare dinner for the billionaire. The aroma of roasted chicken and fresh bread filled the air, making her empty stomach twist with hunger. She hadn't eaten properly all day, but she remained silent, not wanting to cause trouble for her mother. Later that night, after the grand dinner was served and the guests had gone, the servants began cleaning up. Plates full of untouched food were tossed into the trash as if they meant nothing. When no one was watching, Lily walked closer to the counter, her eyes fixed on a plate of half-eaten steak and bread. Her small hands trembled as she picked it up, whispering softly, "Just one bite." She took a tiny piece, her heart racing, her eyes glancing nervously toward the hallway. At that very moment, the sound of heavy footsteps made her freeze. She turned around and saw Richard Hale himself standing in the doorway, his piercing eyes locked on her. Time seemed to stop. Lily dropped the fork, and the sound echoed across the kitchen. Her lips quivered as she tried to explain, but no words came out. Richard's face was unreadable, his expression stern, yet his eyes carried a flicker of something unspoken. "What are you doing?" he asked in a low, firm voice. Lily stammered, I was just hungry, sir. I didn't mean to steal." Just then, Clara rushed in, horrified. "Please, sir, don't be angry. She's my daughter. She hasn't eaten since morning." The room fell silent. The staff stopped what they were doing, expecting an outburst. But instead, Richard said nothing. He just stared at the frightened girl for a moment, his gaze softening. Memories of his own childhood flashed before him. Days when he too had gone hungry, begging for scraps outside restaurants. Slowly, he turned away and said, "Come to my office." No one spoke a word as Clara and Lily followed him. Inside the dimly lit office, Richard's tone changed. "No child should ever have to steal food to survive," he said quietly. "From now on, this girl eats at my table." Clara gasped, tears filling her eyes. Lily's face lit up in disbelief. That single act of kindness changed everything. For Lily, for her mother, and for the man who finally remembered what compassion felt like. Lily froze as the sound of footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Her hands shook, the small piece of bread slipping from her fingers and falling onto the polished tile. When she slowly turned, her heart nearly stopped. Standing in the doorway was Richard Hale himself, the billionaire who owned the mansion, the man everyone whispered about but never dared to look in the eye. His presence filled the room like a storm cloud, his sharp gaze fixed on the trembling girl caught with a plate of leftovers. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound that dared to exist between them. His eyes darted from the plate to her frightened face, and then his deep voice cut through the silence. "Did your mother teach you to steal from me?" he asked, his tone cold and controlled, but with something hidden underneath, something that even he didn't understand. Lily's lips parted, her voice barely a whisper as tears welled in her eyes. "No, sir, I wasn't stealing. I was just hungry." The words came out cracked, fragile, and innocent. She wished she could disappear. Her small frame looked even smaller under the billionaire's piercing stare. Just then, the kitchen door burst open and Clara rushed in, breathless and terrified. "Sir, please, please don't be angry," she cried, throwing herself between them. "She's my daughter, Lily. She hasn't eaten since morning. I had no one to leave her with, so I brought her here." Her voice trembled as she bowed her head, afraid to look at him. The other servants had gathered quietly in the hallway, holding their breath, knowing what usually happened when someone disobeyed or made a mistake. They expected shouting, punishment, dismissal. Richard was known to be ruthless when rules were broken, but tonight he didn't shout. He didn't fire anyone. He just stood there, silent, his eyes distant as if his mind had traveled somewhere far away. For a brief moment his expression changed. Not anger, not disappointment, but something deeper, something almost painful. He saw in that girl's eyes a reflection of a life he had long tried to forget. The sight of her small hands clutching food from the trash pierced through his armor of wealth and pride. Memories flashed. Cold nights, empty plates, his little sister crying because she was hungry and no one cared. He had buried those memories under years of success and arrogance, but now they came flooding back like a wound reopening. Clara's voice broke through his thoughts. "Sir, please forgive her. I'll pay for the food. I'll do extra shifts. Just don't take her away from me." Richard blinked, his jaw tightening, and for a long time he said nothing. Then, in a calm but commanding voice, he spoke. "Both of you, come to my office." The words carried no anger, just quiet authority. The staff exchanged looks of confusion. Clara trembled as she held Lily's hand. Together, they followed Richard down the long hallway, unsure of what awaited them. But for the first time, there was no fear in his eyes, only the faint flicker of something human awakening within. Inside the grand, dimly lit office, silence hung thick in the air. Clara and her daughter stood near the door, afraid to move, while Richard Hale stood with his back to them, staring out at the city lights below. His tall frame was outlined against the glass, and for a long while he didn't say a word. The only sound came from the faint ticking of the gold clock on the wall. Clara held Lily's trembling hand tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. She had seen this man dismiss people for much smaller mistakes. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice low but steady. "You know," he began, "I once knew a girl just like your daughter." Clara blinked, confused, unsure where he was going with this. "She used to wait behind restaurants," he continued, "just to eat what others threw away." Slowly, he turned around, and to Clara's surprise, there was no anger in his eyes, only sorrow. "That girl was my sister," he said softly, his tone breaking for the first time. "We had nothing. Our parents died young, and for years all we had was each other. People used to look down on us the same way I've looked down on others." Clara felt her throat tighten, and Lily stared up at the billionaire with wide, innocent eyes. He walked toward his desk and touched a framed photograph, his fingers trembling slightly. "My sister didn't survive," he whispered. "She got sick. Hunger destroys more than the body. It kills the spirit first." The man who once seemed untouchable now looked small and human, burdened by guilt and memory. The glow from his desk lamp revealed tears gathering in his eyes, and he quickly turned away to hide them. For years he had built walls of wealth and pride to forget where he came from, but the sight of a hungry girl in his own kitchen had shattered them all. Clara couldn't hold back her tears. "Sir," she said softly, "I didn't know. I'm so sorry." He shook his head. "No," he replied, his voice deep but gentle. "I'm the one who should be sorry, for forgetting what hunger feels like." He pressed a button on his desk, and within seconds, the mansion chef appeared at the door, looking confused. Richard looked up at him, his expression calm but commanding. "From now on," he said, nodding toward Lily, "this girl eats with us at the dinner table. Every night." The chef froze, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Clara gasped, her hand covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. "And Clara," he continued, turning to her, "you're getting a raise. No child should ever feel ashamed for being hungry." The chef nodded and quietly left, still in shock. Clara dropped to her knees, weeping with gratitude, whispering, "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." Richard gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't thank me," he said quietly. "Just promise me that you'll never have to go through what my sister did." For the first time in years, Richard Hale felt something he hadn't known since childhood: peace. That evening, the entire mansion was filled with a strange silence, the kind that comes before something unforgettable. The long dining table, usually reserved for elite guests and business tycoons, had a new face sitting at its end. Lily, the maid's daughter. She sat nervously, her small hands resting on her lap, her eyes lowered in disbelief. A crystal glass of water shimmered beside her, and a plate filled with warm food sat untouched before her. Richard Hale, the billionaire everyone feared, sat at the head of the table, watching quietly. The servants exchanged glances, unsure if this was real or just another test. But Richard's face showed no sign of pride or anger, only quiet reflection. As the dinner began, Lily hesitated to take the first bite until Richard nodded gently. "Go ahead," he said softly. That small gesture broke her fear. She picked up her fork and began to eat slowly, her eyes filling with tears. Clara, standing by the wall, pressed her hands to her mouth, overwhelmed by gratitude. Richard watched her closely, and as he did, his mind traveled back to a night long ago when he and his sister had shared their last loaf of bread in a broken home. The image of her smile, faint but full of hope, burned in his memory. He realized how far he had come, and how far he had drifted from the boy he once was. For years he had built his fortune to escape that pain, but now he understood that real wealth was never about what you owned. It was about what you gave. The staff remained silent, touched by the quiet transformation before them. That dinner changed the air inside the mansion forever. Over the following weeks, things began to shift. Richard started joining the kitchen staff during their breaks, asking about their families and listening to their stories. It shocked everyone. No one had ever seen him smile before. Soon, he announced a decision that left the city in awe. He founded a charity organization called Lily's Table, dedicated to feeding hungry children across the country. When reporters asked about the name, he simply said, "It's a reminder of the night I remembered who I used to be." The story of the billionaire who chose compassion over ego spread quickly, inspiring others to do the same. The mansion, once cold and lifeless, became a place filled with warmth and laughter. One morning, Lily came running into the garden, where Richard was reading. She handed him a drawing she made. It showed a big table surrounded by smiling children. At the center sat a man who looked just like him. Beneath it, she had written in crooked letters, "Thank you for not letting me be hungry." Richard smiled, his eyes misting. In that moment, he realized that no empire, no wealth, and no power could ever give him the peace that one act of kindness had brought. Sometimes all it takes is one small moment, a child's hunger, a simple meal, to awaken the humanity buried deep inside the heart of even the richest man. Of the billionaire's heart changed forever after inviting his maid's daughter to his dinner table. What began as an act of compassion turned into a legacy of kindness that inspired millions.